South Africa will only be able to succeed as a country if this issue is resolved, and the Malema trial proves it. So South Africa is doomed for failure if this massive societal issue is not resolved. And it really came out in its most bold form during the trial as well as the pre-sentencing hearings of Julius Malema. Fortunately, this is an issue that can be resolved with some pretty logical solutions. But before we get into it, could I please remind you to subscribe to the channel? It's entirely free, and all you have to do is click on the subscribe button below the video. Furthermore, if you would like to support the channel and enjoy some additional benefits, consider becoming a Power Club member. You can do so by clicking on the join button below. Now let's get into it. So the issue that I'm speaking about is actually something that Sigmund Freud has highlighted in his teachings. For those of you who may not know, he was probably one of the most famous and impactful psychologists in human history. So what's important for us to understand is that South Africa is suffering from a major moral issue, which is actually embedded in one of Freud's most famous theories, which is the psychoanalytic theory. Now, this theory explains how human beings think, and according to Freud, there are three components of the mind that actually dictate how we think and act. The first one is called the id. This is the most instinct-driven, primitive side of our psyche, and it really craves our most basic needs. So, for example, we have impulses that tell us that we need food, water, air, sex, and ultimately we strive to fulfill these needs. Still, there is something that holds us back from being animalistic and, let's say, just simply walking into the middle of the room and stuffing our face with food at the moment we see it, right? And that is the second component, called the ego. Now, the ego is a mental mediator that is able to detect what the id is craving, but still manages to balance this impulse with real-world constraints. So, for example, if somebody finds another person sexually attractive, then what the ego is supposed to say is that there are certain ways of going about courting this person and perhaps pursuing a relationship without violating their physical safety and violating the law. Another example could be food. Sure, you may see some food in a restaurant, but your ego will tell you, hold on, you don't just run into the restaurant, steal the food and run out. You've got to go, order the food, pay for it, because that is what a good citizen does. Finally, you've got what's called the superego. This is the moral conscience that really represents the deepest societal norms that are embedded in your upbringing. And so ultimately, what the ego does is it manages to balance the primitive, basic instinctual needs of the id together with the moral conscience of the superego, and makes sure that you're able to function as a fit and proper person in society. And unfortunately, the superego of South Africans, together with the ego itself, is flawed. And this is proven by the Julius Malema case. So on the 3rd of October 2025, it was announced that Julius Malema had been found guilty on 5 criminal charges. Now, the magistrate who oversaw the case delivered her judgment. It was televised on national television. There is physical, visual, and audio evidence that she alluded to, and she explained quite elaborately how she arrived at her decision. But despite this, there were several protests that broke out throughout the country, specifically in East London, where the magistrate's court in question is located. And it seems as if many supporters of the EFF, or specifically Malema himself, are against the magistrate's decision and have been calling for Malema to basically get off scot-free. Now, it's very important for us to note that this is a severe lack of moral clarity and unlawfulness that has taken South Africa by storm. Because as we can see here in this press release from the National Prosecuting Authority, and it doesn't get more official than that, it explains that Mr. Malema has been found guilty of, firstly, unlawful possession of a firearm, secondly, unlawful possession of ammunition, third, the discharge of a firearm in a built-up area, fourth, the failure to take reasonable precautions to person or property, and finally, reckless endangerment to person or property. And so ultimately, there are 5 criminal charges that he has been found guilty of. Now, we're yet to know what his final sentencing will be, as this has been delayed to April. But what is pretty clear is that he is guilty on all 5 charges. This is a serious open and shut case, and that what these protesters are effectively doing is saying that they would like for Malema to get off scot-free, regardless of the fact that he has contravened the law of the country on 5 separate charges. What gets even worse is how some of the most influential people in South Africa have taken his side and have spouted anti-legal rhetoric. So the first person I want to zone in on is JJ Taban. Now, JJ is a very prominent political analyst and broadcaster in South Africa. He hosts his own show on ENCA, which is one of the largest news channels across the country. Now, this should be an individual who is at least balanced in his views, and even if he does have his political leanings, which is often the case, he should at least be promoting and protecting the laws of the country. But as we watch this video, it becomes pretty apparent that this is not the case.
Prof. JJ Taban. Prof.
Yes.
Why are you here in East London?
Well, a historical moment like this should not pass you by. You gotta be there to observe, to see how this takes the country forward. I believe that it's not even about the EFF. Today it must be maybe Julius Malema, tomorrow it will be you or me. So we gotta be here to make sure that we protect what the Constitution wants in this country. Should the Constitution or the court be used as a political football? That's my question. And I want to keenly watch how the judge is going to play this.
What do you think? How do you think it's going to play out?
Look,
or how do you
look? I think the judge, any judge has to be aware of the consequences of their decision, you know, one way or another. And that's why you've got a situation where there will be arguments for mitigation of sentence or aggravation of sentence. And she must take account all of those arguments that will be advanced by both sides and try and be fair. You know, I'm not for prejudgment of whatever she'll come up with, but the facts will bear us out.
Thank you very much for your support, Prof.
Absolutely, anytime.
So something that immediately struck me about Tabane's address is that he spoke about how this is sort of a political play. But what's really important for us to remember is that for 2 full days, the judge, or rather the magistrate, to be factually correct, read out her judgment, and she explained step by step how she reached her ratio decidendi, or which is in Latin, meaning the reason for the decision. And ultimately, this was a situation whereby she broke down from beginning to end what the evidence was, what the witnesses said, and she basically laid the entire case out for the whole world to hear. You cannot get more transparent than what that magistrate got. Second of all, it's funny to me how he complains about how, well, at this moment in time, it's Malema, and next it could be you or me. What he's basically implying is that Malema is being punished for committing 5 crimes, and that tomorrow it could be you or me. So what are you actually implying, JJ? Are you saying that you would also like to violate the laws of the country? That you would also like to be a criminal and follow in the criminal Julius Malema's footsteps? And perhaps you too would like to evade punishment and basically ensure that justice is not served. This is despicable behavior by somebody who is a top talk show host on one of the biggest news stations in the country. The next time you decide to tune into ENCA, beware of who you're listening to. But it only gets better from there. Here we have a screenshot of an ex-post from Dr. Mbahare J. Kekana. Now, just for a bit of context, Kekana is the deputy president of Action SA, and so he's the second highest ranking member in the party after Herman Mashaba. And he wrote, "Julius CIC Malema, stay strong, my brother. I am with you on this matter. You shall overcome." And so the second highest ranking authority in Action SA supports a criminal, supports criminality, and is against justice being served as outlined by the laws of South Africa. So anybody who is not convinced yet by the malicious nature of Action SA's agenda, I hope you're paying attention, because it's clearly not going any better. And of course, what would this event be without Duduzane Zuma, the son of Jacob Zuma, the president under whom state capture presided? He wrote, "First it was me and they kept quiet." Yes, first it was you being a criminal and people kept quiet because they wanted the law to work in due course. Then it was my father and they kept quiet. Yes, because your father oversaw state capture, with estimates believing that this actually cost the South African economy between 500 billion rand and 1.5 trillion rand. Now it is Julius Malema, and I will not keep quiet. I stand in solidarity with you, Julius, even if I stand alone. Tomorrow it will be one of you, and there will be no one to stand with you. So there you have it. The son of the criminal in chief standing by the criminal Julius Malema and saying that if you want to commit crimes, you better stand by Malema because he's being charged for his crimes and you don't want to be charged for your crimes. And so if we can get Malema off scot-free, well then you can get away with criminality too. And so what this ultimately shows us is that the superego, that moral conscience, has been battered in South Africa by not necessarily all South Africans, of course not, but by a large sector of the population. Unfortunately, with this lack of superego, the ego can't function properly. And that's probably why South Africa has the enormous murder and rape rate that it does. Fortunately, there is a way to overcome this issue, and that is by introducing harsh consequences to actions. You see, if people are not going to have a moral conscience, and they don't even want to follow the laws of the country, then consequences that are harsh, that will punish them and make them feel pain, need to be enacted. I'm talking about things like the death penalty. The time has come that murderers, rapists, and pedophiles face the death penalty. There also needs to be a strengthening of policing. There are far more private security officers in the country than police, and so perhaps it's time to deputize them and give them an ability to arrest criminals, because the more officers are on the streets, the more criminals will be dissuaded. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. If you found it informative, please remember to subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is the Power Pod.